Hello, and welcome again to another episode of the Daily Bolt with your host, Dr. Jeff Tilley. Today's topic is part 2 of our series in terms of issues in science education, minimalist thinking. I've given you a little bit of time to digest the last podcast with some of the things that I see that are issues or problems or concerns regarding the current state of science education in this country, particularly K through 12. And I'm going to follow up on that tonight with the next piece of the puzzle, and that's what I call minimalist thinking. And this actually takes a couple of different forms, and I'll try and go over each of them fairly briefly, and this probably won't be as long of a podcast as the last one, but hopefully you'll get the point. So minimalist thinking here ties back into science education with respect to the fact that, as I pointed out, because much of the current standards in science, the next generation science standards, involve the students needing to express themselves in terms of showing how much they understand through writing, through verbal communication, through other types of communication, but especially in terms of reading and writing. That means that the level of science education is somewhat constrained by the what we call the English language arts or ELA abilities of the students that are also taking science classes. How well can they comprehend what they're reading? How well do they understand the vocabulary? How well can they write and express themselves? And it's where, in this case, science is somewhat limited by the level of the students in terms of their ELA abilities. I have taught at multiple levels, and in particular, one of the things that motivated me towards moving from the college level more into a K through 12 environment was the absolutely awful degree of writing skills, and even, I guess, reading skills going with that to a degree, but ELA skills in general that the students I was teaching as college freshmen had. I taught several students in my introductory college science classes who could not write at a high school level. They could not write at even a middle school level. It was hard for them to put together any sort of functional sentence more than 3 or 4 words. And you could consider these students functionally illiterate, and yet they're getting accepted to colleges. They're getting into colleges. How is that possibly happening? Well, there's another piece of that puzzle that I'll talk about in a future podcast. But one aspect of it is what I'm calling this minimalist thinking. The fact that you only need to teach the minimum to the students. And that'll keep everybody happy. That'll keep the students happy. That'll keep the administrators happy. That'll keep the parents happy, which means the school board is then happy, along with the superintendent. And I ran into this type of thinking in the job that I had teaching middle school science, where I was kind of shocked at the level of writing that I saw out of most of my students. I taught roughly about 150 students every week in various classes. I saw most of them at least 3 to 4 times a week. And their writing skills as 7th and 8th graders just appalled me. Some of them couldn't put sentences together. I had maybe 10% of the students that wrote at what I consider to be an acceptable level, and maybe 1%, basically 1 or 2 of my students that wrote at the level that I used to write at when I was that age, coming through middle school all those years ago, several decades ago now. And most of the rest were just shockingly below what I considered to be an acceptable grade level. Now, in the state of Nevada, I'm not happy with the ELA standards. I'll just say that. I think they're too low. But what's even worse is when I went and talked about writing assignments with the ELA teachers we had at the school, they pretty much flatly said, well, we only teach to the minimum. We don't worry about whether anyone can write better than the minimum or not. What the hell is that? That's just a declaration that the lowest common denominator is the only thing that's possibly important. Is it any wonder that our education system in this country is now below most other high-level industrialized nations, something 36th or 37th in the world, where you even have some second and third world countries with better education systems than ours? With these attitudes are why we have this sliding in standards, this sliding in just being able to get by with minimums, and no one cares about excellence anymore. This is not going to bode well for future generations that already can't do many of the tasks and the jobs that are out there in the workforce that they're trained for, and they want someone else to do it for them and still get paid. And that goes into a whole other mindset in terms of the millennial mindset that is fed by all of this, but that's a subject for another podcast. So we have this minimalist mindset that is showing up particularly, at least in what I'm seeing in ELA programs. I've taught in some other schools in K through 12 as well, and I see kind of the same rudiments of the same attitude. The bare minimum is the only thing that counts. As long as they're meeting the minimum state standard, they don't care about whether anyone gets any better or does better. Now, I know that's not going to be true of all teachers. I know there's going to be teachers out there that would, send me nasty grams and say, well, I push for excellence in my class. And bravo for those of you who do. But shame on those of you who don't. And shame on those of you who also take a general approach to your teaching in doing as little as possible to get through the day. That's not what we're paying you for. Yes, teachers are not paid well. They're not paid what they deserve. At least good teachers are not paid what they deserve. Bad teachers may be getting paid more than they deserve. But how I'm distinguishing between good and bad teachers in that statement is really coming back to this minimalist thinking. I've encountered teachers in various subjects, various grade levels, that really do just the minimum they have to do to get by. And it's not just the older teachers who have been going for 30, 35 years, and they're getting tired and they're ready for retirement. These are some of the new millennial teachers coming up who think they can just get by doing a bare minimum, collect their paycheck, go out and party, and come back the next day and do the minimum all over again. And that is not going to serve our students either. This is going to be basically a rotten foundation that falls, and the whole education system of this country could collapse if there's too much more of that. It really disappoints me. It shocks me. I find I got to school early, and I still get to school early even when I substitute. I try and make sure I'm prepped as much as I can. I do extra stuff for the kids when I can, and for those of you teachers who do all this, again, bravo to you. That's the way it should be. For those of you teachers who just gripe and get through your day and don't want to do more than you absolutely have to, maybe you should get out of the field, because you're not helping our kids, you're not helping this country. That minimalist thinking, doing the bare minimum to get by, is not going to push this country forward. It'll allow it to keep sliding backward farther and farther until this country has the worst education system in the world, which is a lot worse than number 38, but number 38 or 36 or whatever it is still nothing to be proud of, given that it used to be the best education system in the world a few decades ago. That's some food for thought. We'll come back with more discussion on education issues in the next couple podcasts. For now, I'm Dr. Jeff Tilley, wishing you good night, good morning, good afternoon, and God bless.